Hi.
Hi.
The big discussion point in the community forever has been Pantheons and what new gods Pantheons should be added to.
Nope.
A big discussion point in the community for a very long time is what type of Pantheons should new gods be added to. We recently did a Reddit post with a Google form where people decided which type of Pantheon they prefer Smite to prioritise adding future gods to, and why they think this. And we're going to talk about that form's responses in this video, and we're going to discuss some stuff. We should probably say some things at the start, though. First of all, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. So are you, and so are we. So don't get too mad, please. Second,
if you are mad, say it in the comments. It makes our videos be recommended to more people. And then we can get subscribers and then make that YouTube money.
And give us a dislike as well. It helps a lot.
Controversy is what YouTube channels are built on these days.
The second thing we want to point out, these opinions of people, we're more using these opinions to create discussion points for ourselves. So the comments that you hear in this video may have some sort of other context to them, but we've sort of got rid of that context in some of them to make our discussions a little bit nicer for the video. Thirdly, and thank you to Kaios for pointing this out on our Reddit post, the way to get high-res to listen to gods that you want in the game is to make god concepts for them and get attention to gods. There's no point of us making a video complaining about, these smaller Pantheons aren't getting filled up when they don't listen to that. So that's not this video. This video is going to be very experimental. It could go shit.
Yes. Or it could go great.
So there are three major types of Pantheons that future gods can go into. That is smaller Pantheons. So Pantheons like Celtic, Voodoo, and Arthurian that have less gods in them. There are bigger, more fleshed out Pantheons. So, for example, Greek, Norse, and Egyptian. And there are new Pantheons that aren't in the game yet. Those are our three big points. Shall we first see the numbers from the poll?
Yes, we shall.
Without looking at any comments or opinions or anything first, surprisingly to me, 80.3% of people...
Bloody hell.
Of all people, 80.3%, because, people could pick multiple of these three. 80.3% of people at least said something about smaller Pantheons needing to be filled up.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. I mean, I shouldn't be too surprised because that's that was the reason why that's such a big discussion point in the community, is that there are Pantheons that are really small. But 30.3% of people went for bigger, fleshed out Pantheons, and 25% of people went for new Pantheons. So actually people would prefer to have the more popular, like more Greek gods, more Norse gods and stuff like that over having new Pantheons added.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's the exact opposite of what they did for the last few years. They recently kind of took off the shackles of having to conform to Pantheons that already exist and were like, yeah, screw it, we're going to add gods that are in new Pantheons, and they may only have one god in them, but that's what we want to do. So It's interesting the community seems to really not agree with that.
Yeah.
As a move.
Yeah. I think we're gonna start off first with talking about our opinions, just so you lot know where we sort of stand before this video starts, and we'll talk about them at the end as well, in case our opinions have changed based on what you lot have said. So, would you like to start off with your own opinion? Where do you stand on this?
Yeah, sure. I stand, and this is also a valid fourth stance,
right?
That's fairly popular in that I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not that into the lore of stuff. I enjoy mythology, but at the same time, I enjoy the game more, and I enjoy the gameplay more.
Sure.
And for me, and I think this is a fairly extreme version of this opinion that I have, but Smite could actually drop the whole mythological basis that it is on, and just start releasing gods with fun kits, and I wouldn't care.
You wouldn't care what Pantheon they're part of?
Sorry?
You mean like you wouldn't care what Pantheon they're a part of?
If they weren't in a Pantheon at all, if Smite dropped the whole Battlegrounds of the Gods branding,
right,
stopped covering mythology or adding from Pantheons at all, and just added characters with fun and interesting kits,
Yeah,
and
sure.
characters that
like
they...
any other MOBA, yeah.
Yeah, like any other MOBA.
Yeah.
I wouldn't care. It's not a big part of the game to me.
Fair
as
enough.
long as they are making the best gods they can.
Yeah. I mean, that's a completely valid stance. If some people have actually had that, we're going to discuss that a bit later. I think my opinion right now, I'm also sort of on the Pantheon doesn't matter. I like seeing gods no matter what. Less about I prefer gameplay, but more about I just like seeing new gods. I'm always excited about a new god release. But I think if I had to choose one out of the three, I really like seeing new Pantheons, which obviously is the lower end of the voting. But I think having new Pantheons almost means there's more sort of possibility for other future gods. Like, obviously, we're not going to really run out of ideas for characters because mythology is huge, but there's just more people that could come into the game. That's what it is for me, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if I had to pick one of the three options, and wasn't edgy and went for my fourth option. I don't know what I'd actually go for. I think I'd probably add to small Pantheons. Because I liked it. I mean, I've been playing the game for 4 years, and I did like it when it was kind of 5, I think it was at the beginning. Fairly evenly sized Pantheons, and it's kind of like you can do the Egyptian team or the Roman team, or you can do whatever you want with that, and they're all well-defined fields to the characters as well. I think the more Pantheons you add, the more you blur the line of the distinct feeling that they all have.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, let's get into community discussions and community opinions now. So we're going to start off with the small Pantheons. We're going to talk first the opinions for adding gods to small Pantheons. There actually aren't really any against for small Pantheons. So this obviously the community has edged very highly to small adding gods to small Pantheons. But we'll first of all discuss a big point in the small Pantheons area, which is obviously diversity, variety, different culture, representation, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So things like people have said, I would rather see gods from smaller Pantheons with more variety than Greek gods. It's not fair to other nationalities to have their mythos to be just stomped out by the bigger Pantheons. And this also goes on to saying things about sort of education as well. What I really like about Smite is how the gods are drawn from multiple different cultures that I previously knew nothing about. And from HF Javasil on Twitter, there are rich cultures and traditions and tales that go unnoticed because of our Western bias. Smite could serve as a good platform to promote these underrepresented Pantheons in a cool light and bring them into the mainstream.
Is that not more of a point for adding new Pantheons?
See, this is the thing. There is also the point. I mean, later on in the video when we talk about new Pantheons, we're also going to talk about diversity. No.
I'm jumping the gun.
No, it's fine. Because a lot of this stuff in this video can go hand in hand with a lot of different things. Like, for example, all of these points could also be against adding bigger Pantheons. But what do you think to the actual idea of diversity and representation?
Yeah, I mean, if you got to pick one, it does make a lot of sense, especially because the kind of the lesser known mythoses tend to have a lot more interesting things in them. There's a lot of things that you don't know about. I think it's a very good point, the educating on other Pantheons and on other cultures. Yes. It's very important. I think it's very important to have a well-rounded knowledge of not just where you come from. I think it's a very narrow-minded thing to do that. And a lot of people kind of will take Roman and Greek and go, look at all these things I know about. When there's such depth and there's such a range of stuff there. And it's all so interesting and so diverse.
Yeah, hold the interesting point. That's actually next as well. That's another point that goes towards small Pantheons. But I also want to point out something that HF Jeffsel says that Kuzenbo and Jingwei have proven that minor obscure characters can shine. I think we should see more examples of this. So talking about the fact that, I mean, obviously the new characters coming, if they ever come for smaller Pantheons, they're going to be more obscure. These sort of gods are less known than the big Pantheons. but it's proven that there are a lot of gods that can work in a lot of different ways, so it's not necessarily a bad thing to add them. And obviously also goes for Ulleran most recently.
Yeah, I mean, well-known versus obscure gods within Pantheons is part of the debate for a sequel video that we're going to make. No, we haven't got.
Oh my fuck!
What?
Someone literally said that in a comment. I'm not joking. Hold on. I actually need to get this.
Did they ask for a sequel poll?
Literally, the first comment we got was, "I would prefer an option for well-known characters versus unknown characters."
Yeah, that's an interesting, completely different thing to explore. But it's got a very similar argument to the small versus big. Except for the PR case on Hyra's side, why add Odin or Thor or Poseidon or Zeus to the game? Well, they're already in the game, but as an example, like these well-known gods, versus some really tiny, obscure thing which you can educate people and enrich. Because I don't know. I feel it is almost enriching to have this knowledge of little obscure things. That it's really, it's a nice flavour to add to it.
Yeah.
I already know about Zeus and Odin and Poseidon.
You might say they're more interesting.
Yeah, they're more interesting. I want to know about the more obscure things. Oh, okay, that was a segue. I interrupted your segue. Sorry.
I mean, no, you made my segue, thank you. The next point for small pantheons is the gods are more interesting sometimes. Like, I mean, obviously this is opinion-based, but to a lot of people, the smaller Pantheon gods are more interesting than the bigger Pantheon gods. We had comments saying, the Celtic Pantheon was very much so hype for me, as an example, but there's no Celtic Guardian. Filling out the smaller Pantheons and adding new ones allows for potentially more unique gods, i.e. the Morrigan, a name unknown to me before being introduced, but her lore allowed a really diverse god to be made, so by diving deeper into more obscure mythologies can give very interesting characters. And we had someone say, because many of the smaller Pantheons have just as interesting, if not more interesting characters in their lore, and deserve to be acknowledged as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the main distilling of this kind of against big Pantheons for small and new Pantheons. Just the fact that Hyres has such a unique platform to educate and to inform and to spread this obscure knowledge and stop these ancient civilizations from falling into obscurity.
Yeah, it's like HF Javasil says, like, Smite could serve as a good platform to promote the underrepresented Pantheons.
Yeah, like, I don't think there's any other pop culture avenue that's got this as good a position as Smite does to add things like the Morrigan to inform us on these little things and to bring these amazing ancient religions and mythoses back to the forefront of our knowledge. Like
HF Javasil says with Kuzma and Jingwei, just because the god is more obscure doesn't mean at all that it's going to be a less interesting character.
Yeah, absolutely. Watching the patch notes when, say, Arthur or Merlin were released, you're thinking, oh, that's a cool kit. But you could also have that layer, that additional depth of knowledge of when the Morrigan is added, or Kuzumbo is added, or all these unique, interesting gods are added, where not only do they have really interesting kits, then you'll go, that's a cool kit, but it also has this, oh, that's a really interesting idea, like, that's a really interesting thing for a god to be, that's an interesting story that god has. I had that with Persephone. I mean, Persephone is not an obscure god, but I just loved the release and how deep they went into the mythos of Persephone, and to be able to explore that, whereas Merlin didn't have any of that.
I completely agree with Persephone. Even though it's a bigger Pantheon god, they did it really well. But I think the best way of making the more interesting, like the sort of different culture gods, like Persephone sort of has the feel of like a different sort of culture to her almost because of her origins. I mean, obviously it's not a different culture, it's Greek, but to make those sort of feelings for people, like, the best way to do that is to give smaller Pantheons a go, like, and use their cultures.
Lily just made a good point there.
Yeah.
And that's
So the next point is a small one. It's in-game lore. A lot of people like the sort of stories that Smite are using, especially nowadays where the god releases are very much tied into the in-game lore. So someone says on the comments, having more gods / filling up Pantheons opens up more synergy story-wise. So, for example, because of like the Celtic Pantheon only being like 4 gods, you could have more sort of synergy with the Celtic gods if there were more of them. And also someone says, if they're trying to add lore and story to the game, like it seems, then what's the point of the Pantheons with only 1 or 2 people in them?
I don't think that point has a lot of legs, in my opinion. I don't know, I think Hi-Rez, again, is in a unique position where they have this melting pot of cultures where they can bring in gods from different avenues. They don't need to all be in the same pantheon. It's almost like a little fanfic you can make, where you have this like, oh, and then this god from the Roman pantheon was fighting with this god from the Yoruba pantheon, and then you had the Greeks coming in, and the Norse, and then... You don't need to keep the lore of Smite within the same pantheon. It doesn't matter if there's only one god in the pantheon. It's just being added to this really interesting back and forth and dynamic that Hi-Rez has.
But also, I think a reason for this argument of the in-game lore stuff is the fact that, yes, Smite does make their own fanfic with stuff, but they also use the sort of personalities from mythologies to make this fanfic, and that includes like the relationships with people, right? So they've kept the Persephone and Hades relationship, you know, they've kept the Hades and Cerberus relationship, they've kept the Hera and Zeus relationship. But if you have pantheons that have very little gods in them, there aren't that many relationships, and they're not that you can use, and there aren't that many sort of existing interactions you can do with this.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. So it's kind of adding Persephone has added a depth to Hades and more interesting things you can do with Hades. If you added Chernobog's wife and kids, then you could do a lot more with the Slovak pantheon in the lore. Just to be clear, I don't think Chernobog has wife and kids.
Just imagine, just fucking... Chernobog's the least likely person to have wife and kids. Honey, I'm home.
Daddy!
Fucking, oh my god, playing hide and seek with Chern though. Next point, and actually this was probably the biggest point for smaller pantheons, and this is a big topic of discussion, like I think there's going to be for us, that isn't really spoken about too much in the community, and I put it under the subtopic of feeling. Well, you'll know what I mean when I say some things. So
I was hoping.
People have said it seems lazy to just add the coolest gods from a pantheon and then leave it alone. Someone else has said some of the smaller pantheons consist of 1 or 2 gods, and that seems wrong. Some think about the Slavic pantheon having 1 representative feels incorrect. Someone else has said it feels wrong having a god from one pantheon be alone for years, but have big pantheons like Greek get a new god every 5 weeks. It hurts my OCD. Someone else says it feels weird having multiple empty pantheons.
Every pantheon needs 10 gods in it. You
Right.
add 1 god to each pantheon at the same time.
Right, exactly. But this is the thing. I think this is a big reason why people feel like this. And I completely agree. I am OCD with a lot of these things as well. And it does sort of play with my OCD that a lot of these pantheons only have 1 representative. And it feels like it's not necessarily a valid reason. Like, obviously it's an opinion, but it feels like it's not really a valid argumentative reason. Is that it just feels wrong.
I think with feeling, first of all, it's obviously very subjective. It's not a thing you can say as it's not a thing you can say as a concrete point, because people with different feelings will have different opinions on it.
Yeah.
I think feelings are more like that feeling, that OCD feeling that it should be even, is more a representation of your opinion that you're subconsciously using to justify your opinion than it is a point on its own. When you have a feeling about something, it's normally, and this is not even about Smite anymore, but I think when you have a feeling about something, it's more a representation of thoughts that aren't fully developed. I think it's kind of the eking through of your opinion before you've fully justified it and fleshed it out.
So it's not necessarily these people don't have a reason. It's just that
No,
because they're obviously like passionate about this feeling, this idea, but they haven't yet fully just like had an actual argumentative reason that they've found. Yeah, I guess.
yeah, and I kind of feel that kind of there's only one God. It doesn't feel right. But when I think about it more, I think that's more a justification in my brain for just the fact that it feels unfair to those Pantheons.
Interesting. That's an interesting point. I knew this would be sort of this would be I knew this part of the video would be a mindfuck. Because it sort of is, because there's no explaining it, and I think honestly I think most people probably do feel like that if they see like a bunch of mythologies and how many characters they've got in each mythology, and they see multiple of them have got a lot less than the others. I feel like a lot of people do kind of get a bit OCD with that. So I think a lot of people understand where that point comes from, but they can't really, they can't really take that as a justification.
Yeah, and I think that kind of I've forgotten the words he used. It was quite appropriate, but it was that it doesn't feel right not having this here. Like something feels off, and I think that is a manifestation of the natural "that's not fair" response. I think it's more of a, well, how come they get it when they don't? This doesn't seem like a fair distribution.
Yeah, exactly. I've also added this to the feeling subtopic. I wonder whether you agree with this. The idea of balancing the Pantheons. So someone says just cohesion. That's all they've said is just cohesion. Cohesion with the Pantheons. And to balance everything out. The reason why I put that in feeling is because balancing everything out doesn't do anything, technically. Like they haven't said a reason for balancing out. They haven't said to balance it out so that it's more fair on other Pantheons. They haven't said that. It's just to balance everything out and just cohesion.
Just so it seems right.
It's not. They haven't necessarily said anything. They haven't given a reason as to why this should be the case. If every Pantheon was balanced out, what's that going to do? It's not. Nothing's going to happen then. It's just going to make. It's just the feeling that someone would get if everything balance is out is nice, I guess.
I mean, the other point on this, which I think this is probably has more grounding to it than my last point, is that rooting for the underdog is a well-studied and accurate human response. You can there's a name for it. There's a theory that I've forgotten the name of, but you can Google around about underdogs, and you'll see very quickly that a lot of research has shown humans will always root for the underdog for various reasons. There are various theories and models about our, back in tribal times, how we would interpret this. But it is known categorically humans will always root for the underdog.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I noticed that in myself as well. Like that's a good point to end on for the small Pantheon thing. Is sort of a reason what it almost creates another reason, like you were saying, like it creates a solid reason for this feeling. Like if someone doesn't have a reason for it could be just human nature.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of human nature. I think, yeah. So you could kind of just build this point. It's a feeling that it's wrong because you're creating underdogs that should be more represented, and it doesn't feel fair. It is annoying because you can't go to hires and say don't do this because it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's not it doesn't seem well grounded.
It's not a good point. No, it's not a good point. Argumentatively.
No, but I think it is worth thinking about and
absolutely
delving into.
I think the most important point though, that someone commented, it's lonely for Pele.
Yeah, poor
they're just
Pele.
lonely.
And
Chernobog, Baron, they're all so lonely. Give them a friend. Christ, Tyrez. Sick bastards. Right, we're on to the next.
Then
stance.
Just trapped in cages, performing monkeys for you, walking forward when you press W, walking backwards when you press S. Think about them. They're all alone out then.
they're surrounded by so many people that have already made the friends. They're the new people to the school. You always had that new kid to come to the school that had no friends and was just on their own.
Going back to the fundamental images of Chernobyl, him turning up into school with a rucksack.
Fuck me! I want some fucking fanfic on Chernobyl and his like personal life.
His formative years in school.
Yeah, his school life, why he turned into this, like how his family died. Honestly
having to pay for custom backpacks because the wings are annoying.
Exactly. Maybe his family died, and that's why he's like this.
That's
anyway,
how all good superheroes are made.
The next stance is the bigger pantheons. Things like Greek pantheon, things like the Roman pantheon, things like the Egyptian pantheon. Adding gods to these well-known pantheons and already fleshed out pantheons. People feel like this should be the case.
Hold on, are we not covering cons of...
There were no cons for smaller pantheons.
Oh, was it literally... You said earlier on there was not very many cons. Are there literally no cons
there
that
were
anyone
no
could think of?
But like I said, from some of these other points that you're going to hear for bigger and new pantheons, you might hear some cons about smaller pantheons. They go hand in hand.
A pro for big pantheons is a con for small pantheons.
Right, exactly. And also...
Pantheons isn't a word anymore in my head.
I mean, you are saying pantheons and not pantheons.
Am I? Pantheons. Okay.
Yeah, pantheons. Anyway... 4 bigger pantheons. One and actually the most common topic of this is it's marketable for high-res.
Yeah.
For the company, it gets new players, it creates hype. Here's some comments on that. Bigger pantheons allow for more recognizable names to people who may not be knowledgeable on mythology. Advertising these gods arriving to Smite may be more effective at getting new players. Popular and more requested gods should also be created because it creates hype around the game whenever someone who is popular outside of Smite is added. For example, Persephone is well known in Greek mythology, which creates hype when people realise they could be that god. People's interest lies with what they know. You won't pay a lot of money to go and see a Marvel movie if you never heard of the heroes. I mean, you don't know me enough to say that I wouldn't go see a Marvel movie even if I don't know the heroes. But
I do know Danny well enough to know that he would go and see a Marvel film if he didn't know the heroes.
That's beside the point. The point is, it's good for high-res.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. And it's good, not just good for high-res. I mean, yeah, it's good for high-res, but it's also good to get more people in the game, which is also good for the players. More people in the game means better, better matchmaking, better community, not necessarily better community, bigger community, probably worse community, think about it,
yeah.
but bigger community, add more views on NomNetwork. Discuss.
I want more views.
Yeah.
Next point.
Yeah, so your opinion's already changed, isn't it? You want
big pantheons, that way we get more views.
That's right.
No, I mean, it's an often overlooked point. It's an often frowned upon point as well. There's a lot of kind of, there's the idea that the community and high-res are like chummy and best friends, and high-res will always do what's best for the community and what the community wants. And that's true. They want to do that. High-res, I'm sure, want the best for the community. But you can't say it's wrong for them to be a company. Mm-hmm. They still want the community to be great, probably for company reasons, but they also need to be able to make money with skins that are in chests that you can't get to, that you pour money into, and they need to make money by publicising the game.
Exactly.
And it's not a thing that you can be angry at them for. Okay, you can be angry at them for it. It's not a thing that you can be justified in anger for, because they're a company.
This argument almost sort of falls flat a little bit when we discuss what we were discussing before, in that no matter the god that Smite adds, like even if it's a less well-known god, it still creates it's still a really good god, and it still creates hype, like Oleron did. But I'm sure if you look in it deep, if we had the figures and you look at it deeply from Hyra's perspective, I'm like almost positive that like more players played when Persephone was released than they did when Oleron was released.
Also, if we're talking about a company and PR, adding the Yoruba Pantheon and a black god.
I mean, black gods, yeah, representation.
If you distill it down to a company point of view, it is still good PR.
I don't feel like we could go too much more into that because it is, yeah, they're a company, and it's not like it's been a bad thing that Persephone was released. You know, like it was, you know, yeah. I mean, like when you use the point, they're a company, they need to make money. It's usually on the back end of like a bad reason. You know what I mean? But like,
yeah. This
hasn't been a bad reason. Persephone's a great god. But also, another very small and literally only one comment of person that said this for big pantheons is completion, weirdly. Things like sets of gods haven't necessarily been achieved yet. So, for example, the Olympians in the Greek pantheon. I think the Olympians are a group of 12 gods in the Greek mythology they're a sort of set. They're almost like the Avengers of the Greek pantheon, right? Going back to Marvel, there's too much Marvel
because we can't go for a video without referencing Marvel. I think that's a fourth Marvel reference this video. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. The Olympians, and I'm sure there are other sets and other pantheons as well. I think that almost goes under the synergy stuff as well for the story wise.
While that's a point for the Olympians and for the Greek gods, it's a bigger point for I can't make a team out of Yoruba or Slovak or Celtic gods. I can't make a 5-man team out of them, let alone a set of lore characters which are interesting together.
Let's move on from the for bigger pantheons. Let's think about the against for bigger pantheons. May be obvious, but a lot of people have different reasons. One of the reasons is the main reason, the only reason basically, is almost feeling again like before, where there are too many gods of these already. People have said, for example, Smite is currently at a point where it's becoming oversaturated with gods from certain pantheons. The game has done a great job on being inclusive of gods from everywhere, but as of late it seems the focus has been on Greek gods, particularly those we've heard of before, opposed to obscure gods from everywhere else in the world. Someone else says the smaller pantheons have a lot more to experiment with, whereas most of the bigger pantheons already have their most interesting gods. Someone else says, if you focus too much on the big pantheons like Greek, Norse and Egyptian, you neglect the interest of those whose favourite pantheons have yet to be touched.
That's a point that wasn't made for small pantheons, which I think was quite an important one, in that not only are you underrepresenting the culture, but also there are people who love the Slovak pantheon. There are people who the Celtic pantheon and the Celtic mythology is their favourite mythology of all.
Yeah.
And you aren't including any of that stuff because you added Persephone for no reason. Like, it's and I know it's very common, there's probably a lot of people who are big fans of Greek culture and Roman mythology, but most of that's in there. You've already catered to that audience almost. And, I mean, I know people who absolutely love the Celtic and the Slovak and all the other pantheons who are just like, well, yeah, it's nice to have them in the game, but there's almost no point them being in the game because it's just one character or 3 characters.
Yeah. That's basically it for bigger pantheons. I mean, bigger pantheons and new pantheons have less to talk about in general than small pantheons because small pantheons was just so well argued. For newer pantheons now, let's move on to newer pantheons.
I'm interested here because I can't think of a reason for new pantheons that wasn't covered in small pantheons. So I'm interested to see what else there is.
Well, here we go. So, I mean, the first topic is, again, variety, but expanding these cultures and art styles almost. So here is what some people have said about variety in new pantheons. I think new pantheons are really cool. They expand the culture and art style of the game, and that is always a welcome change from the traditional art styles. It adds more variety to the game, not just in new gods with gameplay mechanics, but also adds to the lore, item concepts, and inspiration for map additions. And Jordan R on our YouTube comments said, I have no issue with them adding new pantheons as long as they actually add a new element to the game that other pantheons don't. The Polynesian and African pantheons obviously add much needed diversity to the god roster, while the Arthurian pantheon is kind of just there to bring big names to the game. I mean, it's very similar to the small pantheons as well, but it also adds the point of with new pantheons comes new culture, new art style, just like with Yoruba. African, like, I mean, since okay, we'll say since Black Panther, right? Again, Marvel, but since Black Panther, like, it's just given me this sort of like awe for African.
I mean, you summarized it in your first 3 words, where you just, they weren't even words, but you just went Africa, fuck, like. which is a weird set of words, but it just summarizes kind of my feelings too, in just the awe and just the Africa, fuck, like, oh my god, like, there's so much.
And yeah, if we didn't have new pantheons, if Yuri wasn't added, if Oleron wasn't added, we wouldn't have had that sort of feeling.
Yes, but I would argue, to bring that point away from new and add it to small, the fact that there's no point adding a new style and a new art style and a new feeling if you aren't going to flesh it out by adding more than one god.
That's actually something we're going to talk about in the negatives.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Do we wait till then?
It's fun. We'll wait till then to talk about that. We'll discuss something else for newer pantheons, which is sort of, again, education. Someone says, the new Pantheon gods are always ones I've never heard of and help me to learn about the culture they came from. While seeing any god at all implemented into a MOBA-style character kit is fun and exciting, the lesser-known deities, or at least lesser known to me, are much more interesting both to learn about and generally even to play as.
But I think, and this point stands for that point and the last one, a new Pantheon, I think, needs time to set in. It needs time to settle in, to flesh out, to really explore that culture and that richness and that feeling.
It's like a nice soup.
It's like a nice soup. You need to savour it. I don't see the appeal in getting a tomato soup, getting a spoonful, then getting a pea soup and then taking a thingful, and then getting a leek soup and having some of that, and a chicken soup, and like you need time to experience. That was a weird analogy that you introduced me to that I then went with. But yeah, like, you need time to really experience it, and a spoonful of each soup doesn't give you an idea of the soup, in the same way that a god from each pantheon doesn't really give you an idea of the pantheon. And while it's good that all these different pantheons are getting represented, they aren't, any of them, being fully represented. They're just being, it's almost like a name drop of the Pantheon.
It's like a shout out, and they're doing nothing with them.
As opposed to being a full exploration of the culture.
Sure.
Which it could be if you were to add more gods to the small pantheons.
This whole thing is for smaller pantheons, really.
Yes, this point is for smaller pantheons.
The next point for newer pantheons is again in-game lore. Someone says, adding new pantheons also brings in new cultures and ideas to continue the story of Smite. Smite is, the Smite story is an ongoing story, and adding more cultures to this thing sort of makes it, just gives a whole new flavour to it. It's like a nice soup.
The other point with the new pantheons and the fleshing out of the pantheons is that if you were to add a god from every pantheon to the lore story, it blurs the lines. It goes back to one of the very early points that I made, in that it should be very well defined in order to fully appreciate each culture. It should have a fully fleshed out Greek lineup, a fully fleshed out Egyptian, Mayan, Celtic lineup, so that you can really get a feel for all the characters in that story, in that mythology. I mean, that also goes back to Hi-Rez as well, and it kind of puts the responsibility on Hi-Rez to give each pantheon its distinct feel, which I think they've done a very good job of recently. But it's another thing that kind of, it's, again, made or broken. I'm not sure if you can use that tense of make or break, but it's made or broken on...
It's maked or braked.
It's maked or braked on the quality of the gods that Hi-Rez pumped out.
That's right.
And it's... And no, if they didn't do that, then it wouldn't be a valid point, but I think it's still important to bear in mind the distinction that you get from adding many gods is more valuable than the variety you get from adding new pantheons.
I mean, with the in-game lore point, it's also, like we talked about before, where the synergy of the gods, in the story, gods have more synergy if they're from the same mythologies, right? But if you're adding new mythologies to this story, there's going to be more gods that need other gods in their pantheon, right? So the newer gods the newer pantheons you add to this story, the more pantheons you have to fill up in order to get synergy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that goes back to the synergy point. I mean, it's like when you're making soup.
It's like a nice soup.
You can't just throw all the ingredients in, and you can't just add things that you like to the soup because you like them. It needs to be a strategic placement. It needs to be, this will work well with this will synergize with this has this family of things that you can add to it. Now I'm going to leave it for a while to stew, and now I'm going to, I'll add some nutmeg to that, and that'll make it much nicer, and then, maybe throw in a bit of 5 spices and mix it up a little bit. This isn't good advice, don't make a soup like that. No. But it's, if you just throw it all in at once, or you just throw in everything you like, it may not turn out to work well together.
Yes.
You need to have care with that.
Yes. There's also another point here, another topic on new pantheons. There's been a couple of people that have actually added suggestions on new pantheons that should be added, which shows... It's almost a point in itself, because I've made it a point in itself, because it almost shows that there's a lot of choice that hires have as well for these pantheons. So it's almost a point on its own legs. I'm just going to spew these all out to you. Have fun not listening. The Mesopotamian and a tribe that represents the native people of North America, perhaps Lakota, are pantheons that must be added ASAP in Smite, with their first released character being respectively Gilgamesh and Coyote. A Turco-Mongolian and Inuit pantheons would also be good, however they aren't as high priority as the two in the previous sentence, and therefore could be added in later years. Hi-Res, give him a job! And the next person, this is a personal opinion, but I would love to have the Sumerian/Babylonian pantheon in this game, with deities like Marduk, Ishtar, Tiamat, Pazuzu, Ereshkigal, Nergal, Gilgamesh, Enkidu, Lamashtu, and Akrabuemelu added in the next season/year. A Native American, or whatever you want to call it, pantheon would also work, and made cool with deities like Tatanka, Tesanwi, Hinkara, Sungmanitu, and Coyote added.
They're all amazing ideas. I would love to see all those pantheons in Smite. But at the same time, this conversation has definitely swayed me into a small pantheon's position. You two, and you have your amazing opinions, and it's brilliant, but so many other people have those opinions. I'm sure 2 years ago there were people who were like, I need the Slovak pantheon to be added, add this god, then this god, then this god. Mm-hmm. Someone else with the Celtic pantheon, someone else with voodoo, someone else with all the other pantheons.
Yeah.
And if everyone got their fair share of time, one after the other, then only one god would be added per pantheon.
That's the thing. It's a balance, yeah.
There's so many of these pantheons that need to be added. Say the Native American pantheon was added. If you were to give fair share to all the pantheons that need to be added, you would get one god from the Native American mythology.
Yeah.
Do you want one god from the Native American mythology?
Exactly.
Or do you want every pantheon to have its time to explore it and to go into detail with all the different gods and the detail and depth of the lore?
Hi-Res only has a certain amount of time, a certain amount of gods that they can add, and it's like, I mean, nowadays it's about 5 or 6 gods per year. So they can't both add new pantheons and fill up smaller pantheons, especially when there are more pantheons to fill up.
Also, in order to give every pantheon its unique feel, which I think Hi-Res has a responsibility to do, Hi-Res needs to put in a lot of time per new pantheon added, to have a full game plan, to know all the gods they want to add, a detailed backstory on all the history of the pantheon, and a lot of research and time needs to go into researching what's unique about that pantheon and what they need to emphasise about it. And I think that's a lot of time and a lot of money which can't be spent willy-nilly.
We'll say it, like, they do not have it.
Yeah.
It's obvious they don't have it, and that's absolutely fine. Like,
yeah.
they're a
If
company.
you want the Native American pantheon to be done justice, then it would need to be given its time to be researched and to be fleshed out.
Right,
but
exactly.
Every pantheon needs that, and adding new pantheons adds a whole new list of complications.
And also, the last point of topic for the newer pantheons, I'll reiterate, is mine. No one else agrees with me on the comments we got, but is the fact that the more pantheons we add, the more possibility for future gods. I just like the idea that we could get the amount of options we've had when Yoruba opened up. It's just there's so many different things. So we also have points against newer pantheons. The first one being there are already enough pantheons. Which I mean, to be honest with you, at this point in the video, I think we've covered fucking everything that we could possibly cover, like for each different possibility and where it would lead hires and where it would lead players, etc., etc. But I'll point out some of these comments anyway. I think that there are enough pantheons at the moment, and some could be fleshed out, such as Slavic, and they already have so many interesting pantheons where so many gods could be added. We've spoken about that already in the video to death. But also another point against newer pantheons being added, and we've discussed this before, most don't get filled. If you're going to add new pantheons, it's very likely that it will not get filled, so you need to be aware of that. Someone says, I do not like when the new pantheons are created and not filled. And that's a valid point. Like, their whole comment was based on new pantheons being really cool. But they're like, they're like us. They're saying, well, there's no point in having this new pantheon if it's just not going to be filled, if it's just not going to be expanded. Yeah. The fourth starts. This is the fourth musketeer. People don't treat it as a musketeer, but it is part of them. The new other stance, which is other. I've called it other, which is none of these. But there's a couple of points for being not in any of these stances. One of which being, as we've already discussed, pantheon doesn't matter. Some people have said, as long as the god they're adding is cool, I don't care what pantheon they're from. And someone says, I prefer gods to be chosen based on popularity and interesting factors of the god themselves, regardless of what pantheon they belong to. So, I mean, this was your point before. I would happily stand here as well, as long as the release is cool. It doesn't matter what pantheon they are, it doesn't matter what label they have on them.
I think I'm less on this position now. But we'll get to that at the end.
Yeah, there's one more point I wanted to cover, which is a balance between them all. Here's some comments from people. I want them to add so someone even says, I want them to add notable missing characters from existing pantheons, people like Demeter, Hestia, Balder, Freya, Nephthys, Nut, Tefnut, Shu, etc. But also flesh out the small ones. And lastly, also add notable missing mythologies: Mesopotamian, Aztec. This is just everything. They want everything, and that's the thing.
Why do you want gods that you know about and the well-known gods to be added? What would that do for you? As opposed to a more subtle god that you would be able to learn about.
Because people get to play as them, as a character that they already know. For instance, if I knew, I know, like if there was a ton of characters in a game that I had nothing about, but also Thanos was in there just in the middle, I'd play as Thanos.
I think that's a very fleeting entertainment, though. I don't know, I think the gameplay side is different from the discussion about lore side. I think that gameplay-wise, I go back to my original argument in that just if the god's fun, you'll play it. If the god's fun, you'll keep playing it. If the game's fun, you'll keep playing it. But from a lore point of view, and from the interest point of view, and from the learning point of view, which I think is where I emphasize and empathize with more now, I honestly don't see the point anymore in wanting Hi-Res to add a god that I already know about. I don't want to play as Jesus. I don't care. I already know who Jesus is. But if they add some obscure god that I've never heard of, then I get to learn about them and I get to play as them.
That's fair
which
enough.
I think is the best of both worlds.
I think the point is that with that comment, going back to the comment, is that, like we've discussed before, there's no way Hi-Rez can add everything for everyone with the time they have.
Yeah.
Like, over time, sure. But, if they released like 30 gods per year, which has a ton of bad factors to it anyway, but if they did that, then we'd get everything. We'd get what everyone wants, but they don't, and they can't, which is fair enough. And the last comment I want to make in terms of balancing between all the Pantheons, Kanum on our YouTube comments says, if I were AJ, I would fill up old Pantheons with the community's most wanted, for example Shiva for Hindu, while still introducing new Pantheons but at a slower rate. It could be something like this: look what are the community's most desired gods for the old Pantheons that have small number of characters. Make them introduce one new Pantheon per year with at least 2 gods in it.
I think if I would do a similar thing to that, I think in that I would, maybe not the first point, but definitely the second point of, you don't need to add a new Pantheon unless every Pantheon has at least like 5 to 6 gods in it. I think once every Pantheon's got 5 to 6 gods in it and it's properly fleshed out, then you can look at which Pantheon to add next. I think if there's still so many Pantheons with one god in them, I don't see the point in adding a new Pantheon.
This is what they did a couple of years back.
It's not doing anything.
This is what they did a couple of years back with the Celtic Pantheon. They added the Celtic Pantheon, and the Japanese Pantheon. They added the Japanese.
Yeah.
Sorry, they added the Japanese Pantheon, and within that year, the majority of their gods were Japanese. They added the Celtic Pantheon within that year. The majority of the gods were Celtic. But that also creates something that it means there is no diversity there for the year. Over the year, like over this little course of time, there is not a diverse. Like, if people want more stuff, they're not going to get it because they need to fill up these Pantheons.
Sure, but think about the position Hi-Rez is in now. They have so many half-empty Pantheons, which they can easily add to all of those and still have plenty of diversity in their releases.
Here's the point: Hi-Rez is not going to please everyone. There's no way they can please everyone with this thing. So why not do the thing that a lot of people still care about, and a lot of this argument is for, but also give them more market, make it more marketable. They have to go one way with it. They can't go both ways. They have to go one way with it. Why not do the way that makes it more marketable for them, instead of going the way that both ways are going to please some people, but you might as well please some people and make some money.
I mean, the poll shows not a lot of people want the bigger and the new gods to be added to. I think, while yes, you'll please and displease people either way, not everyone's going to be happy, doesn't mean that you can't maximise the people you're going to make happy. This is getting more philosophical than I thought it would.
This is, yes.
It doesn't mean that you can't maximise who you make happy and appeal to the 84% of people that said add to the small Pantheons. But I actually have a counterpoint that I just thought of. As far as the big Pantheons are concerned, and the big named characters, not only will that bring people into the game who are new, who have never heard of the game before, but it'll also bring people back to the game. A lot of people, currently me included, are big fans of the game who follow this game really closely, but haven't actually played the game in a little while. On like a little bit of a lull in interest or whatever. And as far as the games played per week, or the number of people joining games and playing per week, adding a new god will bring in all those, I would call them sleeper people. It will bring them all out of their holes that they're hiding in, and they'll actually want to play the game again because they've now got this new interesting big ticket character who they want to explore and play with and see what they've done with.
Alright, so okay, we'll quickly go over now how our original opinions have changed based on these discussions. To me, honestly, I mean, having already looked at these comments and stuff like that, mine hasn't really changed much. I'm still on very much the side of I'm more interested in the newer Pantheons, personally, but also I do not care as long as the god is cool. But I feel like you have some differing opinions to your original opinion. Maybe.
Slightly, yeah. I mean, I still play Smite for the gameplay. I still want them to prioritise gameplay. I still want them to not stress about this too much if it's taking time and thought away from how to add their new characters instead of which new characters. But at the same time, I empathise a lot more, and I am very close to the side of. I really want to see those small pantheons, those small, obscure, not all obscure, but mythological gold mines. There's so much interesting, rich information in them. I want to learn more about them.
Which is also, is this almost a point for newer Pantheons as well? Where
No.
If you're talking about mythological gold mines, there are so many mythologies out there that could also be gold mines, even bigger gold mines than we already have, potentially.
Yes, but don't run around just tapping each gold mine once and then moving on to the next gold mine.
Yeah.
There's no point doing that. You want to really dig in there and see what's going on before moving on to the next one.
It's like a nice soup.
It's like a nice soup. I want to see more Pantheons added, yes, but there's no point doing that to me if you don't then flesh out the Pantheons. And I think right now it's much more important that we see these 1 to 3 god Pantheons be fleshed out more and have more depth added to them.
I mean, you don't just take a sip of each soup. You eat the whole soup, don't you?
You eat one soup, then move on to the next one, and you give it time to process.
Do you eat the soup or do you drink the soup? Interesting. That's another topic. That's the next community discussion.
We're gonna do a Reddit poll.
Yeah. So look out for that. Thank you very much for watching this video. Again, this was an experiment for us, so let us know what you thought of it. If you want to get in with the discussion, as always, there's a link to our Discord server in the description. And thanks to everyone who submitted their opinions through the Google form or on our YouTube comments. If you'd like to watch us talk about hidden Easter eggs in Smite card art, then you can click the video on the left. And if you want to see how the first round of our most fun Guardian bracket went, then click the video on the right. But other than that, take care.
Bye bye.